And we are back with another outstanding episode of Square Table Degenerates. Today we are joined by reporter Miles Garrett. How are you today, sir?
Doing well, Joey. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Just smoking. I actually went to church this morning, first time in a while. It was kind of cool. Sitting up there, we had a Nigerian priest, which was weird because it's like the entire congregation is like lily white, and then you got this Nigerian dude up front. It's kind of odd. But yeah, that's what you gotta do, man. You got
Father, forgive me for my sins.
right, exactly. Sin doesn't know any race, bro. You can sin no matter what race you are, and be forgiven regardless. So,
Absolutely.
so from what I gather, you were born in the Atlanta area sometime in the mid '90s. Is that correct?
That is correct. 1996 to be exact.
Okay, '96. So you were born a year after the original Miles Garrett. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
well, a couple months. I think he's September. Me and him are about the same age.
okay. So you're a bit young to remember the epic Braves pitching staff from the '90s. Now, do you have any early memories? You got like your parents, your uncles talking about like how awesome Greg Maddux and Smoltz and all those guys were. What's your first earliest memories of Braves, like baseball, people talking about that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, no, it's funny actually. The early days of the Braves, my favorite player growing up wasn't any of the Hall of Famers. It was actually the catcher Javi Lopez. He was my dude. He was like my first favorite athlete. But yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to grow up in Atlanta and not, the big three: Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Chipper, Andrew. All those guys. They're all, I mean, for call, all those dudes were just beasts for those Braves teams. But no, it's funny because the elementary school I went to from third grade basically up until eighth grade, John Smoltz was actually a chairman of the school. So I would see him there from time to time. I actually went on to a dance with his niece, which was funny. Allison Smoltz is her name. Yeah, no, it's funny. There's a lot of connections there in Atlanta with the Braves and everything. But yeah, I was always around it. Went to a bunch of games with my dad, my family growing up, so it's just a part of everyday life.
Hell yeah. Well, they stole my soul as an Indians fan. They stole my soul in '95. And we'll get back to that later, but in a different way. We'll talk about the time your soul got stolen. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. We'll get into that later. But what major sports did you like when you were playing when you were coming up? Were you like out there playing basketball, football, baseball out with your buddies in the street back then? I mean, what was your recreational life like when you were coming up?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I played a little bit of everything. Baseball, tennis, football, you name it. Basketball was the only sport I was just never good enough to even, they couldn't even give me a sympathy, cut, one of those types of things. But basically middle school up until high school was just football for me. I didn't really do anything else. Have the concussions to prove it. So that was basically it. I had to stop playing my senior year because I had too many concussions. But yeah, it was mostly football for me.
Okay. Now, is there besides sports? Was there any chance? Did you like play an instrument? Were you into like dancing or anything? Was it all sports pretty much, or was there any kind of other endeavors like were you in scouts, something like that when you're coming up?
Yeah, no, it was all sports for me. Yeah, I mean, I played piano for a little bit when I was a kid, like every other kid. But that was basically when I got to middle school. That kind of died out. I wish I kept doing it, to be honest. I would love to be able to play the piano now. But yeah, it was mostly just sports. I did a couple plays, but again, it was like, what every other kid was doing at that point. So I was doing it because my friends were doing it. Yeah, I think that's just about it. Nothing too interesting to offer outside of that. I wasn't in Boy Scouts or anything or, any of that stuff. But yeah, no, there's actually a few ties though from my schools growing up. Like in middle school, I went to middle school with Chase Elliott, the NASCAR driver.
Okay.
I was number 8. He was number 9 on the football team, oddly enough. So I went to school with him. You may be familiar, Dylan Cease, the pitcher.
Yeah, good name. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to high school with him. His nickname for me in weight training class was Amoeba because I was so little. So I always remember that. I went to school with Carl Lawson. I played with him, formerly with the Jets. He tackled me. It hurt. Who else did I go to school with? There's a few. Yeah, if you know a pitcher by the name of Paul Bird, he used to pitch for the Phillies, the Braves.
He's on the tribe for a little bit. I remember Paul Berg.
Yeah. So he was my baseball coach growing up. I went to school with his son. Now he's a sideline guy for the Braves. So I've worked with him now because of what my job is, which is funny. But yeah, no, I grew up with a lot lot of sports folks, I guess, in the Atlanta area.
Okay. We had a question from B Wiz. You might be one of the first people we've had on in a long time who's young enough to answer this. Do you have a favorite Pokemon?
Sorry to disappoint. I never got into Pokemon. I like never did. Never had the games, never had the cards, like never did. So I hate to disappoint, but I was never a Pokemon kid.
All right. B Wiz also asked robots or aliens to live with if you had to pick one of those two.
Robots, if I get like a Terminator to guard me, like that'd be pretty cool. I'd probably do that.
It would have to be, yeah, I would have to pick the robots too. Well, I mean, I don't know. It depends on the aliens. Because, like,
yeah, I feel like, if we're dealing with, the cartoon aliens like ET, then yeah, I'm going with the Terminator. But if we're dealing with, some next level stuff, who knows? I might have to take the alien.
Right. What if it's like we don't really want to get into like if it's a sex robot or a sex alien. That's really weird. That's really weird. I'm never going to get that bad.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm going to rely on a robot or a fucking alien to do it. Because, I mean, it's weird too. Because, like, women, they would rely on a robot or alien. Hell, half of them use robots now. You know what I mean?
Robots are, no one learned any lessons from any movie that came out ever. So, it'll be humanity's downfall, I'm sure.
Probably. I think we'll just unplug the robots before it's all done. Like, that's what people know.
Before they become self-aware,
Right, just let their battery power run down. That's the thing. People are like, oh, these robots can take over. Yeah, you ever seen the battery power on some of these items? It doesn't last long.
Yeah.
And robots just walk down the street and have to recharge. Now, I've heard you in the past say that your favorite teams coming up were like Georgia Tech and the Braves. Now, were you a later fan of the Falcons, or do you remember the Michael Vick years? When did you start getting into the Falcons team?
It's funny. I had a very, 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 very brief stint as a Buccaneers fan, mostly because my first memory growing up of NFL football, was seeing the Buccaneers helmet, and I was like, oh, that's a cool helmet. I really like the Buccaneers, and I didn't know any players or anything. I just thought they had the cool helmet. So very briefly liked the Buccaneers, but then, living in Atlanta, you got to start rooting for the hometown team. And that wasn't very hard when you have Michael Vick as your quarterback in those early days. But yeah, no, I remember that. I remember seeing him, the Madden, Madden is probably the earliest memory for me of really starting to get into football, really kind of understanding it and, knowing the players and everything, like Brian Finneran, Warwick Dunn, all those guys for Atlanta in those early days. Yeah, no, it was an early fandom, I'd say, probably around 2003, if I had to give a year to it.
Okay, and one of my questions was actually about that Madden 2004. I mean, if you guys remember, you go back and you remember Madden. Some of you guys remember playing Madden, some of you don't. Some of you guys ain't played video games like me in years. But that Madden 04, if you just played the Falcons and just ran sweeps.
It's like Bo Jackson.
Right, yeah, it's like Bo Jackson Tecmo Bowl. You just run around, you just win. It was domination, man. But along that line, did you get personally with the dog fighting and all that? And in my personal opinion, Vic has more than redeemed himself. Yes. He has. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, he did this. The guy said he's sorry. He was young, whatever. We're not going to debate that. But you personally, how did that affect your fandom at all? Were you kind of like, what's going on here? What was that with that when you were coming in?
No, I wouldn't say it affected my fandom. It was just more or less oh man, what's the team going to be like now? Now we've got Joey Harrington at quarterback. Bobby Petrino just left the team. Seems like a franchise in shambles right now. Luckily Matt Ryan was just a year later and they got back to the playoffs fairly quickly. The turnaround was a lot quicker than what it could have been. Yeah, I wouldn't say it affected my fandom by any means. It was certainly disappointing. But when, as you were saying, I think it's been the consensus for most people in Atlanta in that they forgave him because of how apologetic he was doing his time, the donations he's made to the animal shelters across. I've interviewed him a bunch of times and he's a very pleasant man, awesome guy. I've at least 5 different interviews I've done with him, one-on-one, and he's a great dude. So I've got nothing against him. Our sports anchor, actually, DJ Shockley, former quarterback with the Falcons in Georgia. He's told me a bunch of cool Michael Vick stories because he used to be his backup in Atlanta. So yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about Michael Vick.
I remember Shockley too. Shockley was a hog, bro. That guy was big.
Different era. I think DJ is a higher pick in the NFL draft. I think it was just a different era back then of drafting quarterbacks.
Yeah, we were all guilty of this, Andrew. For his first online purchase was Michael Vick dog chew toy. I had a shirt. It was Big Dogs, and on the back it had a picture of Michael Vick, said dogs number 1 anywhere or something. It was so stupid. It was a different time. People loved. We gotta be real about it. People love dogs, and You know, they got caught up in it, and the guy did 20 months in prison, dude. That's a long fucking time.
He did his time.
There's guys like Dante Stallworth. I don't even think they did jail time for killing people. I don't think Ruggs is going to do as long as Vic did. So, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, whatever with that, you know what I mean? But yeah, it was a different time for sure. Yeah, what do you think, real quick, about this? Carolina getting the #1 pick from the Bears, man. What do you think? We'll talk about the Falcons in a little bit, but do you think that was a good move by the Bears?
By the Bears, yeah, I think it was a great move by the Bears. I think they're now, especially with the cap space that they have to work with. I mean, they've got the most cap space in the NFL. The Falcons have, the second most, but the Bears have #1. And I'm glad that they are sticking with Justin Fields, because I think he showed enough to prove that he is, that he's got that potential at the very least to be a star in this league. If he can fix it or put it together, time will tell. But he hasn't really had the best team to work with the last couple of years. So I always thought that was a little bit unfair for him. But yeah, no, I think it's a great move for them. They can build the team the right way now. They can add a bunch of players these next few years. I mean, it's obvious they're in a rebuild. Right. So they can really give weapons to Justin Fields. You add DJ Moore, Chase Claypool. I mean, Chase Claypool isn't a #1. So having Chase Claypool as your #2, maybe #3 is, I think, an ideal situation. You maybe draft another wide receiver. You get the guy out of Ohio State that Justin Fields is already familiar with. Maybe you have, maybe not to this extreme, but you get Justin Fields as Jamar Chase, basically, the guy that he already has chemistry with. And, you've got picks to work with now, so I think it's a great move by Chicago. For Carolina.
Do you think that Justin Fields is better than CJ Stroud? Me personally, dude, I mean, I've watched a lot of Ohio State. It's pretty much, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, by those the only teams I watch. I think Stroud's a little better than Fields, man. I really do. I think he'd throw downfield better. Fields is probably a better scrambler, but do you think that at the end of the day that Stroud's going to have a worse career than Fields? Then is that what you're kind of saying roundabout way, or what do you think?
It's hard for me to assess because I'm slightly biased toward Justin Fields because I saw him play high school, and I saw him basically being neck and neck with Trevor Lawrence at that point. Like, people fail to realize, in high school, Trevor Lawrence was, the superstar. But as far as recruiting rankings and everything was going, it was basically 1A, 1B. Like, you couldn't go wrong with either one of them. It wasn't like Trevor was here and Justin was here. Like, they were right there. And then, it was disappointing to see him, not really get a shot at Georgia. But what he did in Ohio State, it was sort of the same. Like, I saw similarities because there were moments with Justin Fields and CJ Stroud at Ohio State where you see those, you see CJ Stroud's game against Georgia, you see Justin Fields' game against Clemson, where they just look like, bar none, the best player on the field. But then you have games like Stroud had against, Michigan, or Justin Fields has, a stinker random game against, I don't know, Purdue, who knows? So it was a little bit of a consistency thing for me, for both of those guys. But you're right. I think Stroud is a better pure passer. But I think overall, Justin Fields is a more talented player with higher upside.
Okay. Now, I read that you went to Milton High School for your first couple of years, and then you went to Cambridge for your second 2 years, something like that.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I looked into Cambridge High School. It says it opened up when you were in high school. Is that part correct?
That's why I left Milton. Yeah, they just built the school. It was a mile from my house, so it made sense to just switch schools.
Okay. Now, did that turn into, you were playing football at high school, did that turn into an instant rivalry? What was the deal with
No. Their classification is still, to this day, still lower than Milton is. I mean, they've gotten better, but Milton's way up here as far as, the classifications and the amount of talented players that they have. I'm hoping Cambridge gets to that point someday, but Milton just has a bigger school. They just have more students there.
Okay. So it's basically just a case of Fulton County just had way too many kids and they built another high school kind of thing.
And Cambridge, now Cambridge is already almost too full. So they're probably gonna have to build another one soon.
All right. And I'm assuming you wanted to play football at high school, right? Now, how soon did you realize that okay, I wasn't gonna be able to do this? Cause you're 5'10", says we're at a 4.7 40. That's, ballparkable. What was the deal there?
I'm not sure where you got my 40 now because I never actually had an official time for that. It's probably about what it was if I had to guess. Yeah, no, I mean, I was never very good. I mean, it's always, that whole, regret as an adult of what could have been. Before my senior year, I was most likely probably going to be the starting wide receiver for the first time, ever for myself. But then right before the season started, I didn't really get cleared by doctors. So it was one of those things where it's like, who knows what could have happened senior year. But yeah, I mean, I highly doubt I was going to be good enough to play anywhere collegiately. I mean, I went to Elon, which was a smaller school, so maybe I could have walked on there and, been a scout player and dressed a few games. But I knew my limits. I know what I am. I'm not very fast. I'm not very talented. My dad was actually very talented. My dad had a preferred walk-on at Georgia Southern in the 80s when they were beasts. Yeah, no, I knew my limitations pretty early on.
Okay, so say you would have been there. Say you were 2 inches taller. You had 30 pounds more muscle, whatever. Would you have went to Georgia Tech? Do you think you would have went there?
I don't know if I was smart enough to get into Georgia Tech. I mean, I wanted to go early on in my high school career and as a kid because I wanted to be like a pilot, engineer type thing. Like it was the perfect school for that. But then as I started getting older, number one, I realized I wasn't into math and science. So I was like, it's probably not going to be a good idea for me. And number two, as I wanted to become a journalist, a reporter type thing, it's not really a school that Tech has anything to offer. So I kind of had to switch allegiances and switch what I wanted to do pretty quick.
Because like Tech is like, I mean, it's been a hot minute since I looked up, stats and stuff. But I remember Tech was like all dudes and like a bunch of.
I think it's like a 70-30 ratio.
Man, you dodged a bullet there, right? So you ended up going to Elon out of high school. Did you go with any thoughts of the service, anything like that? You pretty much were set on college, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was never really going to go into the service. Yeah, I mean, Elon, oddly enough, wasn't a school I was really interested in. It was kind of like a school that I just applied to. I wanted to go to the bigger schools. Like I really liked Florida. My dream school was USC, Southern California. But yeah, it was mostly Florida and USC that I had my eyes on. I got into both schools. I just couldn't afford the out-of-state tuition, which is brutal, especially USC.
USC's like what, $60,000 a year or something?
Nuts. Nuts. But yeah, I got a little bit of an academic scholarship at Elon, so it was just a natural fit to follow the money at that point.
Okay, now did you go in there with the mind you're like, I'm going to be a broadcaster? What was your initial, going into college things you wanted to do or you were thinking about?
Yeah, no, I went in wanting to be, with the goal of being like on ESPN and that kind of thing, but I didn't quite know the pathway to get there. So early on, I'd say my first 2 years, I was mostly print, like doing newspaper stuff. I did a lot of radio stuff for our school radio and our school newspaper. And then my third year is when I started experimenting with the TV stuff. We had like a sports show per se, more like a sports debate show, I guess you could call it. And I did that. I thought that was kind of fun. And the more I talked to some mentors and teachers, it was, this is what you need to do. You need to start, at the local news level and build your way up. So that's what I kind of started doing. I interned the summer before my senior year where I currently work now, Fox 5. So I interned there for a summer in their sports department, which was really great. I mean, that internship where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like, this is fun. Like, I'm at Falcons training camp. I'm interviewing Julio and Matt Ryan. Like, this isn't work for me. This is awesome.
Right. Fun as hell.
Yeah. So I was like, once I did that internship, I was like, all right, this is what I need to do. So did that, graduated, got my first job in Macon, Georgia at the Fox affiliate down there. Was there for about a year and a half as like a news and sports reporter. It was like 90% news, 10% sports. So didn't really like doing that, but eventually transferred up to South Bend, Indiana. Was there for 2 years covering sports. Pandemic happened, so it wasn't as good as it could have been covering Notre Dame. I had taken it because it was the best station in the market and they covered Notre Dame like hands-on. But then the pandemic happened and you couldn't really be as hands-on anymore. It was a lot of Zoom stuff and they couldn't really cover the team as much. But yeah, I did that for 2 years. Got switched back to news again when they made some cut downs. And an opportunity opened up at Fox. So here I am back in Atlanta.
Nice. You kind of answered my next question off the bat. Do you like the TV or radio or print better? I mean, it's got to be TV, no? Out of all the things you like best?
Yeah. I mean, it's the medium that I've always wanted to do. That's always been the end game, be on an ESPN or a Fox Sports or doing stuff like that. But I mean, they all have their own things. Like there's a little bit more pressure, I'd say, for TV. The deadlines are a little bit harder. The workload's a little bit harder. Print, it's like you interview, you get your interviews, you write the story, you turn it in. It's pretty basic. radio, you can kind of show up in your pajamas if you want to, like it's kind of easy like that. Whereas TV, especially someone in my position, because I'm not firmly as established yet since I'm a little bit younger, I have to shoot my own things. I have to, get it ready and then get in front of the camera and make sure I'm focused myself. Like I don't have a cameraman 80% of the time. So I got to make sure that looks good. I got to make sure I look presentable, in a suit and everything. And I got to shoot my own highlights, edit the highlights, write the script. If I'm doing a news package, I got to write the story and put all that together. And, it's a lot of stuff that people don't really see. And then you got to do it on a deadline. You got to do all of that and have it organized and sent in, in time. Otherwise you're in trouble. So, that's kind of how TV goes.
Now, how drastically, because you graduated, what, 13, 14, something like that?
High school.
How drastically different it's changed a lot since then. Is the medium just itself? I mean, did you think like YouTube and everything else? I mean, a lot of it was pandemic driven, but like it's a lot different in my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion. I don't know. That's what we'll get into here, but like from when you started to where it is now, it's just so different in my opinion. What would you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something they sort of train you for in college, really. At least at Elon, they did, to, always be ready for the next medium to come out type thing, because it is. I mean, it's inevitable. You can't stop it. When I was in college, TikTok obviously wasn't a thing. And look how big it is now. You have people getting their news from TikTok now. But I mean, as funny as it is, like, it just, that's how it is. So, who knows what the next thing is going to be, because the next thing is going to come, whatever it is. And whenever it is, it's going to come. Change is inevitable in our industry. And I mean, you got to look at it from a perspective of just looking at print. Print's slowly dying. No one reads a newspaper anymore. They all look at it on their phones.
Right. Literally.
And it's starting at the small print. Like some small newspapers are already over and gone with. Now you see, big papers like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure like they're stopping their print newspapers just for weekends now. Like I think that's the only time they're going to be doing it soon. So, I mean, you're seeing it small, gradually steps like that, where it's like, oh, you apply and you can only see it online, that type of thing. And that's just the way it is. And then I've seen it already at the local TV level, just the cutbacks that they're making. They try to make someone do the job of 3 people, whereas back in the day you had a cameraman, you had a producer, you had a reporter. Like now it's like you do all 3.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the nature of the business. So, you got to accept it and be ready for the next thing.
And something like TV is a captive thing because everybody wants to work at TV. You got to be real.
The amount of people I've seen enter this business and leave within a year is it's a lot.
Right. Because everybody wants to do it. So people will literally, I mean, and then you got people who got rich parents who want the kids to get into it. They'll actually pay for internships to get to, it's just such a zero-sum world entertainment. It really is wild.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's a sick business.
All right. We got a standard show question. We ask Queen or the Beatles. Who do you got out of those 2 bands?
Queen. I can't stand the Beatles.
Okay. You'll make the Brits happy. That's one of their favorite answers.
Good.
All right. We got a question from B-Wiz. Favorite hobbies or any bad habits you have?
Favorite hobbies. This sounds super cliche and I'm probably going to sound like an asshole, but I love working out. It's a big thing for me. I always set aside 2 hours every day, listen to music. I really like it. Do that. I have a dog. I like hanging out with him. We go to the park a good bit, hang out with him. I love movies. Love watching movies. Me and my roommates, we enjoy watching the movies from time to time. Bad habits, bite my nails a lot. That's probably a bad habit. Nervous tick, I'd say.
As long as they look serviceable, you can bite.
Yeah. Trying to stop, always trying to stop. But yeah, another bad habit. I don't know. Probably have so many that I just am not. That aren't
right. That's more of a question we got to ask his friends than him.
Yeah, exactly. They'd probably give a better answer.
All right, we got a question from Andrew. Have you covered any issues with men and women's sports, like the swimmer thing they had or anything like that? You ever been
as in what, like issues or what?
Yeah, just any articles you ever like, hey, this person's a man and they're a women's swing event or something like that. Have you ever been?
Are we talking like transgender?
Yeah, stuff like that.
No, I actually personally have never covered that. I've seen stations that have, but my coverage is usually relegated to certain areas. Like for instance, my job currently with Fox 5 is mostly like my job title is basically Falcons producer. So the Falcons technically employ me as well as Fox 5.
Okay.
So my job title usually revolves around the Falcons. Now, do I do other things? Absolutely. But, they try to keep me sort of, on one particular thing if they can.
Okay. Well, on that note, what is the hardest part of your current job? We got a question for JP.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably what I was explaining earlier, just, the deadline and having to do all those things yourself. Like I'll give a great example of this. Last week at the NFL Combine, I was there all week. And, I was told at the beginning of the week, it's like, oh, like, you'll turn one news package a day and, you maybe have one or two live shots, which is pretty standard. I've done stuff like that before. No big deal. But then the very first day I get there, Marcus Mariota gets cut. So suddenly I have to go live at our noon show. And, do that all by myself. I got to wagon up, 70 pounds of equipment with me outside in the cold to get to a good spot while I'm in like a suit. So I got to do that. And then the next day, Jalen Carter, there's a warrant for his arrest 15 minutes before I'm supposed to interview him. So suddenly I go from having one news package that day to being live in the noon, the 4, the 5, the 6, twice in the 6, and then later in the 10, and sending back like 3 different packages. So, that's very difficult to do, especially if it's just one person. Like that's hard if you have a cameraman. Like one person, it's very difficult. So I would say stuff like that is probably when it gets very hard.
That's great. Yeah, because a lot of us are YouTubers. We don't realize it because we're all independent and stuff. But yeah, if you got corporate pressures and they're paying your salary, you gotta watch that shit because they will come down on you.
Oh yeah, no, it's like we need you live to start our 4 o'clock newscast, to start our 5 o'clock newscast, to start our 6, and then you have to have your sports hit at the end of 6 that you already were going to do. So it's like 4 more things that weren't on the schedule already that suddenly are on the schedule now.
That's great. All right, we got a random question from Andrew. He says, how many times a week do you eat at the Waffle House?
It's funny you say that. I actually went there for dinner last night late. But no, I don't go to. That's actually the first time I've been in a while. But no, I mean, it's a staple here. It's at every corner. So, you always go to, it's always the, the hangover spot. It's the late night spot. It's the I want breakfast spot. It never fails.
Nothing wrong with the Waffle House. All right, now it's time for you to suffer a bit. Now, there are only a couple moments in American sports history I consider worse than being a Cleveland fan. And one of them, I know what I'm talking about right here. One of them was when your Falcons were up 28-3, and they end up losing the game. Now, to open up some old wounds, where were you when you were watching this game, and describe your emotions through the whole process?
I was in college. I was a junior in college, and I remember it very well because at Elon, I'd say like 80% of that school is from Boston. So, I was at a party, with a bunch of Patriots fans, and first half was great. They're up 28-3 and things are great. But it was funny because before 28-3, the Falcons were still known to, blow leads. Like it was very common. They've done it multiple times. So, we're watching the game. The Patriots fans are like, congrats, you won. And I'm like, it's not over. It's not over. It's not over. It's not over. Like I've seen this a million times. And then sure enough, in the third quarter, they start scoring. And like, I'm even texting my dad. My dad, like, as soon as they scored 2 touchdowns, my dad texted me. He's like, it's over. Like they're going to lose this. I'm like, I know. And I'm just not ready for it because this is so big. I never thought in this moment that this would happen. But sure enough, it happened. And I think the moment where it was like the staple that I knew was going to happen was when Edelman made that catch. I'm like, those are things that is just like when it happens, it's like, okay, just destiny's on your side at this point, right. Like all the momentum is. But oh yeah, I remember very well. I cried that night. It was brutal.
So that's pretty calm, actually. Let me tell you a story about 1997. That you were pretty young. You were probably still in diapers at that point.
Oh yeah, I was one.
But the Indians were playing the Florida Marlins. They were called the Florida Marlins back then.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And I was watching Game 7, and fucking was Hernandez was his name? I can't remember. One of the guys from the Marlins got hit up the middle. Fernandez. What the hell was that second? Renneria. I can remember. Maybe it was Renneria. Renneria hit a ball up the middle. Anyways, we lost in the game with my fiance at the time. I still know her, so she's probably the only person I heard to vouch this story actually did happen. I was sitting there, and I'm violent, dude. I was a drinker. I was a violent drinker. I drank St. Ides, and I grabbed the 40 bottle, and I smashed it over my head, and that motherfucker broke in a million pieces.
Oh, my God.
Dude, I still lived at home. I was only 28 at the time, and that got all over my dad's. Oh, no, I had to apologize like 8 million times. Like,
jeez,
that should have been an eye-opener to stop doing it, but there's many other stories that are violent like
makes
that.
For good memories.
It makes for a good story, but at the time, dude, that's kind of
no.
hellacious. Imagine you're dating somebody and they break a beer bottle over the head of the result of a sports game. It's kind of like
a little scary. Yeah.
Right. What's going on here?
Maybe a red flag. Who knows?
All right. At what point in your life did you realize you had the same name, albeit different spelling, as someone else who was getting quite famous in Mr. Myles Garrett?
Oh, it was senior year of high school, because when I was in high school, as a person who was playing football, you're always looking at, who the best recruits are, in the country. And I was like, of all years, my literal year, the number one recruit in the country is me. And I'm like, of course, this has to be like my dream. This guy's living it out it's literally my name. Yeah, I mean, I figured it out early on. And then, early in college, I would get tweets, like very, very rarely, but it'd be like, oh, like great game today against Texas or whatever. And I'm like, good one. But it'd be fun because people would actually think I was him. People are just careless on Twitter, duh. So that would happen. But then it really blew up when he got picked number one overall, because that was when, I remember I got like 200 followers that night. And I'm like, are y'all like, I don't even have a blue at this point. And when I was in college, I didn't even have a blue check mark. Like, how do you, it didn't even compute. Like when the helmet thing happened, then I understood it, because I at least had the check mark. I had WSBT in my bio, and it was clearly a white dude holding a microphone. So I don't know where that correlation came from, but yeah, I'd say it really blew up when the whole helmet fiasco happened.
Now, were you a fan of his at any point? Did you were you like, okay, this guy's cool? Or was he just another football player to you?
Oh, I mean, it was cool. I mean, if you have a guy that has your literal name and he's a superstar, it's hard to not, be like, oh, like that's cool, But I've seen videos of crowds chanting Myles Garrett. It's like, oh, like, that's kind of cool. They're saying my name.
When we were at the draft was in 2021 here in Cleveland. It's funny. I was actually at the 2017 draft in Philly. It was a first draft I went to. And that was a wild time. It was so hot, but that was a really good time. But then in 2021, when he was up on the stage, I was front row of that draft. And that's when he was saying that Myles Garrett. It's like you're thinking, that's cool as hell. We got a question from JV. He says, what's his thoughts on my Chiefs dynasty or hold your horses? What's your
dynasty? Dynasty. Oh my God. Right? Absolutely a dynasty. I mean, they lost their number one generational wide receiver and arguably got better. I mean, if that's not a testament to you're a dynasty and you're not going anywhere, I think that was it. Because teams sometimes lose a great player like that, and it's like, oh, then the wheels completely come off. But no, you have one of the greatest coaches of all time, top 5 in my opinion. You have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, who's not even in his late 20s yet.
Hall of Famer now. He has Hall of Famers.
Yes, now, absolutely, dude. No question, he's a Hall of Famer now. But yeah, I mean, as long as you've got those two, the wheels are going to keep turning.
All right. Have you ever rolled your Porsche or any other cars?
Rolled Porsche. Oh man, I wish I had a Porsche, but no, I have not. Glad to see that Myles Garrett was okay. It's actually ironic because that happened the week before they were scheduled to play Atlanta. I remember getting that notification when I was on my way back from, I believe, Seattle. I think that week the Falcons played Seattle, and I was on a flight back. And it happened like that. Like we were working on trying to set up like an interview with him and everything. And I was like, well, so much for that. Like, that can't do that anymore. So it was kind of disappointing, but yeah, no, I'm just happy that he was okay. But yeah, no, I can't say I've ever done that before.
You were talking about Atlanta. It makes you right. Now, is it true that there's a Chick-fil-A at the Falcon Stadium and that it's still closed on Sundays?
There it is, but luckily there's a lot of other events that happen at that stadium. So like there's a lot of college football events, there's a lot of other concerts, and that stadium is always popping. Something's always usually happening at that stadium. So everyone always sees the Sunday thing, but there's always things happening.
It's still funny though. All right. At this time last year, Deshaun Watson, we get to some Deshaun stuff here for a little bit. Deshaun Watson was rumored to come to either here, the Browns, the Saints, the Falcons. What were your thoughts at the time about your Falcons potentially trading for Watson?
I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it to this day. I mean, again, personal thoughts, I think it had more to do with Arthur Blank than it did Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, because the plan that Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot have had up to this point has been fairly consistent. So the whole Deshaun Watson thing sort of seemed like something I was like, this doesn't seem like something that was part of their plan. it seemed like something that Arthur Blank was, very close to Deshaun Watson. He was a ball boy for the Falcons. And I think it was more spearheaded. Again, I don't quote me on this. I have nothing to confirm that this was the case. But that was just my vibe of it. Especially the cap situation. I mean, the Falcons they're in great shape now. A lot of patience required for that. But I mean, the last 2 years, there's been no team that's had more dead cap than the Atlanta Falcons. So it was one of those things where you have journeymen at every single position on this team right now, except maybe Grady Jarrett at that point. And of course, Kyle Pitts, he's just coming off his rookie year. So the move just didn't seem to make sense other than, putting butts in seats and, having that franchise guy immediately. But yeah, it just didn't make sense to me. I mean, just the money situation, the off the field situation. I mean, just everything didn't seem to add up there.
Now, what are your thoughts about how Deshaun ended up here, how much the Browns gave up? And do you think it'll eventually, obviously last year's a wash, whatever. Last year, personally, as a Browns fan, was the worst year I've had in 40-some years as a Browns fan. It was just that bad. The whole year talking about all this stupid shit. They're picking over what's this, what's that. I'm fucking done with it. Regardless, what are your thoughts on what the Browns gave up and going towards the future? Do you think it could be a good move? Could it be the hindrance? What's your take on that?
I didn't think it was a good move just solely because, I have my own personal reasons that I'll leave out. But from a football standpoint, that much guaranteed money, which is, I think, what we're seeing with the whole Lamar Jackson situation. I mean, you completely handicap yourself from building up a team around. And, one player doesn't make your team. I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you need some help and you need a good coach. You need a good foundation to surround that player with. And I think $230 million for a guy that, his part of his game isn't scrambling, but it's moving. He's not a pocket passer per se, or not limited to being a pocket passer. And I think that's amplified even more with Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson moves a lot more than Deshaun Watson does. So when you're giving that much, not money, guaranteed money to a guy like that, it's a hell of a gamble. That's all I'll say. It's a hell of a gamble. And
it is a risk. I think what happened was Haslam watched Draft Day a little too much. And then
great movie. I love that movie.
I'm not going to lie. I went to Draft Day with so much good hopes. But, I mean, even as a Browns fan, movie was kind of garbage if we're being real.
Oh, I love that movie.
I mean, there's parts of it to like. But, as a Browns fan, we didn't win any games. Jim looked like an idiot. Yeah, I mean, it makes Cleveland look like more Browns again. I mean, it's kind of funny. My favorite part in the movie was where I think it was Deion Sanders was like, "I know what you're thinking. He committed felony or whatever." Oh, that was such a great line. I wish I remember the line. That was a great line though, from Deion in that. Now twisting it to your Falcons. It's a good segue into the Lamar stuff. I'm going to give you one of three scenarios, and I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen and what you want to happen. Okay.
Got it.
Number one. You draft whomever at 8 and then roll a random veteran QB and Desmond Riddler. So, you roll with Desmond, you draft a lineman at 8, whatever, and then you bring in whoever, another Matt Ryan kind of guy. Number 2, you bet the farm, trade for Lamar and the huge guarantee contract, which is going to have to do. Or number 3, you draft a QB at 8, maybe trade up if you need to, depending on who's available.
Option 1. That's what I want to happen. It's what I think will happen with this team. It's funny with this whole Lamar Jackson talk. Everyone has said the Falcons are an obvious fit, and my whole question has been why. And it's not. And I get why. It's a team that needs a quarterback, but there has been no indication from Atlanta, as a reporter especially, that they've had any interest in Lamar Jackson. It's been all he'd make sense. So of course Atlanta would be interested, and it's no, there hasn't been any reports that they are. In fact, it was funny that day that was, I believe a report came out from, I think his name is Matt Lombardo, came out with a report that the Falcons were, having discussions with Lamar Jackson in Indianapolis. And I think that was the first time I'd ever seen a report, not a rumor, that there was discussions. So I retweeted it basically being like, hey, this is the first time I've seen something like this, but I have no indication of who this source might be. Almost immediately, a source with the Falcons texted me being like, "No, this is incorrect. It's not." And almost immediately after, the Falcons came out and said, "We have never had discussions with Lamar." And I'm like, well, that makes total sense because they've never given any indication that they were. Like last year with Deshaun, it was odd. There were reports that they were talking with Deshaun Watson. Lamar Jackson, there's never been that indication. And again, it goes back to what I think that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith have been building. I don't think it fits the mold of what they're doing to sign a guy like Lamar Jackson with all the cap space that they finally now have. They've been waiting for 3 years now to have, and basically build up the team, because you also have to consider what's going on if you give an offer sheet for Lamar Jackson. You got to give it, and then you got to wait 4 days. And who knows what happens in those 4 days with the other free agents. So you do that, say the Ravens match it, which I think is what they're doing. I think that's the indication of what the Ravens are. They want other teams to do the betting for them.
Oh, yeah.
And, if that happens, then you make the offer, the Ravens match, he doesn't sign with Atlanta, and suddenly all this money you had in free agency, you don't get Lamar Jackson, and you don't get any of these free agents. So I think it makes perfect sense for the Falcons to roll with Ritter for this season. I think he showed enough in 4 games to be, earn a start to start the season. And you have a team now that you can finally build. You haven't been able to build this team for 3 years. Now you can actually add some players to a pretty decent young foundation. I mean, Kyle Pitts, I give him mulligan to him this past year, having to play with Marcus Mariota. Marcus was very inaccurate. Great guy, but very inaccurate. And you saw what he did with 1 year with Matt Ryan. He broke the tight end record. Drake London has a ton of chemistry with Desmond Ritter. They're like best friends, and you saw that at the tail end of the season. Tyler Algier, very, very promising, broke the rookie rushing record for the Falcons. And obviously you have Cordell Patterson, a little bit older now, but now that you have a guy like Algier firmly set at running back, you have a guy where he can kind of mix and match a little bit. And you got Grady Jarrett on defense, AJ Terrell. Now you can build around those guys and give them something to work with. Give Desmond another receiver. Give the defense some guys in the trenches to pair with Grady Jarrett. Get a Jesse Bates to put in the secondary with AJ Terrell, I mean, it's just there's so many possibilities that you can do if you don't sign Lamar Jackson.
I like Bates coming to Cleveland. I think he's going to come to Cleveland.
We'll see.
So that answers the question. Is you pretty sure they're just going to roll with Riddler next year in Atlanta for the starting quarterback?
I think so. I think he's deserved it, and I think he will. And again, also next year, say Desmond Ritter doesn't work out, next year's draft class is loaded, and if that's the case, suddenly you've got a very firmly built team outside of the quarterback position. You can go make that move for a quarterback next year. Trade a couple picks and move up and draft a Drake May or a Caleb Williams or Shadir Sanders or any of those guys who have a big season this year. There's a lot of good prospects in next year's draft class.
Okay. That being said about Lamar, you think he goes back to Baltimore? You think that they're pretty much just negotiating through the franchise tag kind of thing?
I think so. I don't see another team that, the only teams I can see with the money, just the money guaranteed that could do that. I think the Falcons are one of the only few teams that can do it. I don't think they will do it. I think the Bears are a team. They've set their sights on Justin Fields, so I don't think they will. And outside of that, I haven't really seen too many that could. I mean, I know teams like the Lions or Washington would love to, but I don't see them having the capabilities to do so. So in that regard, I think he goes back to Baltimore.
Okay. All right, we got a question from JV. Another Tom Brady question. Do you think Tom Brady will actually stay retired? People saying, hearing things about going to the Dolphins, etc. Brady's my age. We both were born in 76. No, he was born in 77. I was born in 76. But he's old now, and I'm old, and I know I can go out there and play football. Well, I mean, do you think it's pretty much all just scuttlebutt? I mean, people trying to get clicks at this point, right? There's no chance Brady comes back, is there?
I don't think so, especially at this point. I think I think his tweet kind of firmly said it when someone was suggesting it, and he was made a joke about his kids. I think at that, he could have very easily not commented on that if he was very interested in coming back. I think him commenting on it and making a joke out of it kind of shows that he is done. I mean, he's got nothing more to prove at this point. I know last year he didn't either, but just the way he played this past year gave me the sense that he's checked out a little bit. His heart wasn't in it like it was before. And it's sad to see because he's as much as I despise him because he was a Falcons killer. I mean, he's still Tom Brady. He's still
right.
The guy, growing up, and it's like the last person from my childhood that is gone now. Now it's the whole new wave. I think he's done.
Wait till you're older than everybody in the NFL, like I am right now. Then
I'm already at age 27. I'm now a journeyman in the NFL.
Right, you're on your second contract.
Yeah, I'm all washed up now already.
Look at your broadcasting options. Good to go already broadcast here, right?
Mhm.
All right, now you're from Georgia, so I have to ask you some Georgia questions.
Go for
How
it.
many peaches do you have on you right now?
How many what?
How many peaches do you have on you right now?
Peaches. I do not have any peaches, and it's funny because I don't know a lot of Georgians that do have a lot of peaches. I think that's just a thing because I just don't know a lot of Georgians who are like into peaches. Like
It's
Chick-fil-A
funny
and
too,
Waffle
it's on
House,
your
I think
border too. It's like the potato to Idaho. It's the way people correlate it up here.
oh
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
no, it's a huge correlation, but yeah, I you don't see peach stands, you don't see people being like, oh, like we're making peaches today or anything. Like it's not really a thing.
Now, how many Vandalia onions could you finish off if I just put a bucket of them in front of you?
I don't even eat them.
No, no way, no way. Those things are
Yeah, I
actually
guess I'm
really
not a
good.
real Georgia.
I really like. I do like the Vandalia onions. Those I do like. I do like
Yeah.
those. Those things are sweet. All right, what's your favorite Outkast song, and how many times do you listen to Outkast every day?
Oof. I'm just proving my non-Georgian every single. I'm not a big Outkast guy either.
Ah, no way. What kind of music do you fuck with? What kind of music you
I mean,
listen to?
I listen to a little bit of everything. I mean, I'm not too big into rap. I mean, the only time I really listen to rap is like when I'm in, I'm working out or something, or in the car trying to get the bass up or something, going to a party. But yeah, I mean, I like country during the summer. I think it's more summer music for me. No, it's again cliche. I like a little bit of everything. It's kind of hard. It's such a broad question, but I like a good bit of everything.
Okay. How many pecan rolls or pecan have you eaten
Oh
this month?
man, God, you guys are just coming after me right now. None. I think the last time I had that was like a Thanksgiving a few years ago.
I'm not gonna lie. A pecan roll sounds really good right now. I'm
It
actually
does
kind of
sound
hungry.
very good. It
I
does
might get
sound
one of those after the show. We'll see. We'll see. All right, let's talk about something near and dear to my heart. I'm a weirdo, but sports logos are team names. Now, it's no secret to the masses that I wasn't a huge fan of the baseball team changing their name and logo, but that's neither here nor there. Throwing all that aside, do you think it's inevitable that the Braves change their name? And if they did change it, what do you think? What would you want it to be?
The Braves.
Like the Braves?
I pray they do not change their name. I love the Braves name. They've been very adamant about how they're not going to change their name, and they've also been very adamant about their outreach to the Native American community here. The Braves do so much for the Native American community in Cobb County, and they host events and history, that type of thing. Like the Braves do a lot of stuff with that. So I think their leadership, their community, and the Braves are the biggest team in the state. I mean, I'd say it's them and Georgia, as far as the teams that people support the most. So I think the amount of support that they get kind of will keep. Like if they weren't as big, then I'd say maybe. But given how big the franchise is and being the oldest franchise in Major League Baseball, the Braves, I don't think the name changes.
Okay. Do you think they will ever legalize weed in Georgia, or will just be wait until the federal government does it kind of thing? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know enough about the topic to give an answer. I'll say that.
Okay.
I was a political reporter for about 3 months last year, so I guess I could probably give a better answer back then, but I would not know enough about the topic to give a good answer on it.
Well, I probably got old, fast political reporter. Fuck that shit.
It kept me employed, so I can't complain.
Right, I guess it was the job, but my goodness, like being an independent political reporter. That's why, I do this shows like this, just all lighthearted and stuff, because that would just eat at your soul, all that negativity. It's just so negative, so ridiculous.
Yeah, you can never please anybody. Someone's always going to be upset.
Right? Ridiculous. All right, back to sportscasting. What are some people you idolized when you were coming up and wanted to sort of be like? For me, I love Bob Costas, Pat Summerall, Keith Jackson. What are some common names you either styled yourself after or just really idolized that drove you to this business?
It's funny. I never really had anyone that I was always like, because of that person, I want to get into the business. I mean, I did have people who I wanted to be like their position. Schefter was always a guy. Field Yates. I actually met him at the combine. He was a really nice guy. What's his name? I always forget it. I love Kirk Herbstreit growing up.
Herbie, love Herbie. Beautiful.
Yeah, trying to name some of those younger guys. Tom Rinaldi is who I try to model my stories after. He's the best storyteller in sports. So, when I make a story, I try to do my best Tom Rinaldi impersonation. I'll never get there, but doesn't hurt to try. But the guys like that. Schefter was probably the main guy because in high school, I remember I sent him a tweet asking him like, what do I have to do to get to your position? He was nice enough to DM me really quick and like sent me, do internships, read, study, work hard, doing like just little things like that kind of stood out where I was like, oh, he didn't have to message me. That was kind of cool.
That's cool.
So things like that.
Did you meet Jared Muller or Mary Kay Cabot at the Combine, Browns reporters?
I did not, no. I didn't meet a whole lot of Browns folks up there, to be honest with you. I mean, everyone was there. I just didn't run into myself any Browns people.
Well, speaking of the draft, who do you think is going to go to the Panthers at 1? And who do you think your Falcons are going to take?
So I guess now there's new talk that the Panthers may trade down. I don't know if that's they're really trying to talk about draft day with Kevin Costner. It looks like they might be doing something like that. I think they've got their eyes set on Stroud. I think that's the indication that they're giving. If they get Anthony Richardson, I'll laugh because I personally am very anti, very nice man. Like great interview, but as far as a prospect, I never saw him as a
workout warrior. Right?
It's funny because before the combine, I spoke to a bunch of people. And it's like this guy is gonna find his way into the first round because of what he's gonna do at the combine because he's just a freak. Like he's an athletic freak. But I mean, you turn on the tape and it's like this guy's. I don't know what you're seeing here. Like you'll see 1 or 2 plays where you're like, okay, that's a first round play, but it's like 2 or 3. You're like, oh, okay. What is he doing the rest of the game? But yeah, no, I think as far as the Panthers are concerned, I think they go after Stroud. The Falcons, I think it all depends on what happens. I think there's so much movement that can happen in the beginning. So many picks that could go. You say Richardson, Stroud, and Young are all taken before the Falcons. That leaves a pretty good defensive player. They're going to fall right in your lap. I don't think Will Anderson falls to them. My prediction was Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa because I think he interviewed well with them. But I mean, if Jalen Carter falls to the Falcons, I don't see a scenario where the Falcons pass up on him. I mean,
that'd be a fucking great fit, right?
That's arguably the best player in the draft. And if he falls to 8, which who knows, could be a possibility, depends on how teams are viewing it. Then I think that's an obvious pick. There's been some talk about Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback. I don't think that's the route the Falcons are going to go. I think it's going to be a defensive player. I mean, I think that's unless they go Peter Skoronski on the offensive line. I think that depends on what they do in free agency. I think the Falcons will end up re-signing Caleb McGarry. And if they don't re-sign him, I'd lean maybe more to Skoronski that they may take. But as it currently stands, I would lean toward one of those edge rusher players, maybe a Tyree Wilson who maybe falls there.
Do you think Rodgers is going to be a Jet? Is that inevitable, or are they? Is that going to?
I'm so sick of Aaron Rodgers, man. It's such unnecessary drama that I think he thinks he's so much more important than he is. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't even care. But if I had to guess, like. I would assume he goes to the Jets just because I think the Jets are all in on getting him. And I think the Packers are frankly sick of him at this point. So in that regard, I think so. But I could totally see him being like, no, I'll stay with Green Bay. Thanks for courting me, but I think I'll stay.
Right? Because he's like, what, $40 million cap hit or something. You all make a good point. Favre 2.0 because Favre went to the Jets.
Went to the Jets, exactly. At least Favre retired first. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's just a character, and I think he just enjoys being a troll sometimes.
Oh, he's like Logan and Jake Paul. He knows how to stay relevant in the news. Yes. Yeah, I mean, like LeVar Ball a couple years ago, it's like, just stop talking about this guy and he'll go away.
Exactly. He feeds off the attention.
Now, are you stuck forever in Georgia, or would you travel to like New York City or LA or anywhere really if the terms and conditions were right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying I'm very happy doing what I'm doing right now. So, the Fox 5 is treating me very well. I love the people I work with. But, down the road, years from now, if something comes up, I'd never be opposed to a good opportunity. Yeah, no, I can't complain with what I'm doing right now.
Okay. Now, and you touched on this a little bit, but how, if any way, did the pandemic affect your career and trajectory, and what you hoped to accomplish? Did you anything like, oh, I was going to do this and then the pandemic changed it, or is it kind of just the same thing you touched on a little bit? But
yeah, no, I mean, I tried to make the most of it. you know, it was hard because when the pandemic hit, they made me, I was the number 3 sports guy. And then when the pandemic hit, they made me basically the weekend sports anchor, which on paper is an honor, but in a pandemic when there's no sports and you have to fill 3 to 4 minutes of content every weekend of sports, it's like, oh, my job just got really, really hard. But it actually worked out. It was actually one of the reasons why I got hired by Fox, because I was forced to get creative. So like I did like movie skits, like when there was no sports happening, like we did March Movie Madness, the best sports movie. And like I'd act out like movies, you know, like I'd dress up like Rocky or Rudy or something. And like we did skits. So like it forced me to be more creative, which helped me out in my career by forcing me to think outside the box. So stuff like that, I'd probably point out too. But as far as the pandemic, yeah, I mean, it changed, luckily not permanently, but changed how sports was covered for a long time. You know, it was all Zooms. You know, it's not as fun anymore when you don't get to go to the games. You know, you got to cover press conference. You don't get to establish relationships with players. You know, part of it is when you're there every day and you're interviewing them, they know you, you know them. Like there's a comfort level established there and a trust. But you know, when it's behind a screen, you don't really have that anymore.
Right. I remember the first couple training camps when they, let fans go back. It was just so nice just to be able to see the players converse. Because like that whole couple of years, I mean, the NFL, they pulled that shit out their ass, man. That was a wild time. Remember, they were having games on like Wednesdays, and one game, Denver's didn't even have a quarterback, and they just let them play. And it's like, come on, man. But that's
oh yeah, no, it was. I mean, I'm glad we're done. Knock on wood. I'm glad we're done with that time.
All right, we got a question from Drew. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but ESPN is the devil, true or false?
I have never seen anything from them that would warrant them being the devil, and I would love to potentially work for them one day. So I'm no comment for me.
I feel you on that, brother. All right, do you have anything to promote, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, if there's any of your viewers in the Atlanta area, I'm on Fox 5 Atlanta pretty frequently. I've been anchoring a lot of weekends lately, so if they want to tune in, Fox 5 Atlanta is the place to be. Very active on Twitter as far as Falcons coverage or sports coverage is concerned. My handle is on screen right here at Miles Garrett TV with an I, not a Y. Yeah, I mean, that's where you can find me. That's where I post most of my stuff. So yeah. Good
stuff, brother. Well, thanks to Miles Garrett for joining us. Join us St. Patrick's Day, man. We're not going to have any guests. We're going to have some people in the studio. It's going to be a banger, man. People, yeah, I mean, I love having people over. Like, obviously, I'm not going to fly you up to Atlanta, my independent show, but like, like having people I totally love that connection when you're in studio. You know what I mean? So I feel what you're saying on the missing the in-person stuff, because in person, I'm always going to be rather be in-person guy. YouTube is just convenient, you know what I mean? So do like that. But yeah, in person is the way to go. But thanks for Miles Garrett for joining us, guys. And we'll talk to you next time. Take it easy, bud.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey.
All right. See you guys.